Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 362, It Struck Me Every Day. Now, when this poem was first published, it was only the first stanza, and it was printed in the Amherst Literary Monthly in June of 1891. When later it was published in 1896, it was titled The Soul's Storm. In some ways, we are back to poem 280, I Felt a Funeral in My Brain. And in that regards, the scholar David Priest has pointed out that she made a comment in April of 1862 to Thomas Higginson, who we've spoken of often, that, quote, I had a terror since September I could tell to none. This is in letter 261. And in this period, Priest goes on to point out, lightning struck her every day. The anguish burned her every night in dreams and sickened fresh every morning. And even the wildest storm was not, as she had always thought, the soonest over. Priest also goes on to point out the interesting irony of the voice, humor almost, at the end of this little poem. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.now, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you have as well already read the previous 361 poems. We just finished with 361, What I Can Do, I Will. And if you have done that, then you put this poem and the study of this poem in a larger context, which I think is important. I want you to notice how this poem of anguish ends with a certain kind of what, as I said, Priest suggests, a kind of rueful humor, maybe of a kind. Now, we have commented on several different orientations from scholars talking about Emily's stressful moment or something happening in her life that led to all kinds of, she will call it anguish, okay? Here, it will simply be it, but it's probably referencing a despair of a kind. Lyndall Gordon, the great scholar, has commented on the possibility that Emily struggled with epilepsy. And because epilepsy was in many ways not well understood in her own time, that this will lead to her withdrawing from the world. Now, this is a pretty radical idea, but he looks at a poem like this in his treatment, and he sees in this poem certain kinds of hidden revelations, if I can say it that way, of what the epileptic experience for her was like. Some have read this poem simply as Emily speaking about the insight moment, the Socrates called it his daimon, the insight moment of poetic inspiration, and the ways in which it's challenging, it's brutal, it's blistering at times to have that kind of information coming so directly to the poet. This is how she says it. It struck me every day. The lightning was as new as if the cloud that instant slit and let the fire through. It burned me in the night. It blistered to my dream. It sickened fresh upon my sight with every morn that came. I thought that storm was brief, the maddest, quickest by, but nature lost the date of this and left it in the sky. Didn't pass so easily, in other words. Now again, the antecedent of the pronoun it, much has been debated about this. You could consider it dread, or you could consider it poetic inspiration. How you see that will obviously change the way you read this poem. Notice it's every day. We're back to poem 355 in Day's Face. It struck me every day the lightning was as new. And the fact that it's every day suggests that no, this is probably not some kind of epileptic fit, because epilepsy wouldn't happen every day. Now, the fact that maybe there's fear about it possibly happening could be every day, no doubt. The lightning, and this will be her referencing the exemplar that she'll use as lightning, was as new as if the cloud that instant slit. We'll see slit in 556, slit the hills, and again in 606, and let the fire through. Now again, notice fire capitalized. Is she talking about something she's pleased with or not pleased with? By the way, notice at the end of the first stanza, it isn't clear that she is saying that this is terrible. It's just that it's overwhelming, maybe, or enlightening, to use the idea of light, right? And then she'll go to burned and blistered. It, whatever it is, despair, dread, maybe inspiration, burned me in the night. So notice we go from the day to the night. It blistered to my dream. By the way, blistered is only used one time in all of her poetry, so we want to pay attention to the use of the word, and it's here. Notice my capitalized, dream capitalized, It, one more time now to finish the three, it sickened fresh upon my sight. Now, the sickened seems to suggest that whatever it is she's referencing here is not something she's enjoying or she's welcoming, but rather she wished she could somehow repel. With every morn that came, in other words, long, hard nights. This was rough. And, of course, the poem can just be read as a theodicy, an explanation of the pain and suffering that occurs. And she says, man, it was rough, absolutely rough. She finishes with, I thought that storm, so notice she'll call the it a storm, but it still doesn't tell us actually what it is, was brief, right? As in, the harder it is, the quicker it will go away kind of thing. The maddest, and this is an interesting word for us. We saw it already in 238. We'll see it in 1288 with maddest heart. We'll see it in 1430 with maddest joy, and then we'll see it one more time in 1764. The maddest, quick as by. She said, that's what I thought, that's what I hoped. But nature, notice capitalized, lost the date of this and left it in the sky. In other words, didn't go away so fast. And I think at 2a, this is really your argument, that sometimes hard things don't pass quickly. Challenging things don't pass quickly, and you got to learn to deal with them. At 2b, obviously, the vague antecedent of it here, are we talking about dread? Are we talking about epilepsy or some experience like that? Are we talking about poetic inspiration? Like, what are we talking about that was so challenging for her that it damaged both her days or challenged both her days and her nights? At 3a, I'm going to go back to our study of Dostoevsky, who, of course, many have equated Emily and the work of Dostoevsky in his Notes from the Underground, where, think about it, both of these writers are trying to capture some kind of a mental or emotive experience that is translinguistic. You can't put it so well in words, but you can say, it kind of affected me for much longer than I had hoped. The storm didn't go away so fast. Finally, at 3b, when was a time when you had to endure this kind of chronic pain, suffering, challenge, if that's how you read this poem? I hope Emily is challenging you. Thank you.